It's a bit parky. I've got my big coat on. Got a couple of jobs I need to do that I've been putting off for about the last year. I've got a new rocker cover gasket to deal with the one oil leak that I know I've got. While I'm in there, I'm going to do the valve clearances, which they've not got any worse, but I suspect they're a little bit larger than they should be because the engine's a little bit rattly. So we'll see what's going on under there, and hopefully my fingers will survive because I can't wear gloves while I do this. To make my life a bit easier, I'm going to take the airbox off first because it's kind of in my way. It's about the same size as the engine. That's not because it's a big airbox particularly, but because it's a very small engine. You can see the rocker cover is down here, and I'm getting a problem with the gasket leaking on this corner and the other corner, which is over there. You can see why the airbox is in my way. So we'll pop that off first. That's the easy job. Doing the valve adjustment, it's not difficult, it's just time consuming. Airbox lifted out the way there. It's just these big bolts here, and there's 3 of them that you unscrew, and that comes off. And it's this bolt and this bolt under here I need to undo, and then this should pop off and we can get in at everything. Always make sure you've got a steady supply of tea while you do this kind of job. You want to keep yourself warm if you're working outdoors. Oh, that's not tight at all. Well, that's good. It means it hasn't been over tightened. And you'll be seeing this, well, for the first time, just like I am. I've not looked in here before. These are sort of threaded inside, so you have the bolt in the rocker assembly here, and then these sort of screw in on top, so like an inside out bolt. It's been ages since I've worked on one of these, so I can't remember how everything goes. But there's only like 4 moving parts in an A series, so it's not going to be that difficult. Right, should just be those 2. This bracket for these cables, someone's cable tied that on, so I don't need to worry about losing that. Don't need to take the filler off, that's all part of the rocker assembly. Rocker cover assembly rather. Now we just have to get it round. What do we have? Throttle cable, which we just slide out of its bracket. Ooh, that's not good. Might be due an oil change. Oh dear. That's yeah. I'll confess, I've been a little bit lax in my maintenance on this one. Normally, when I get a new car, I do the oil change and the coolant change straight away. It's had a coolant change because we put the new radiator on, as you'll have seen in a previous video in this series, but I didn't do the oil, and I've been running around with it, with the oil it came to me in. I don't know when it was last done, but I think it might have been a while ago. I'm a little bit concerned about the state of that, because that kind of says that's not had an oil change in quite a long time. There isn't a great deal I can do about it today. All I can really do is clean up what I can, so I will do the inside of the rocker cover because that's disgusting, but the actual gasket, which is this here, is rock hard and in pieces and overdue a change. So that should help, but yeah, that's That's not great. We're going to have to put some, well, definitely do an oil change and definitely get probably some cleaner through this just to get that back in good health again. But it's an A series, they tolerate a lot of neglect, and honestly I haven't noticed any issues particularly. The engine's perfectly willing, I'm not holding traffic up or anything, so yeah, it's just a bit noisy. Okay, in our book it says turn the engine with a spanner on the crankshaft pulley bolt. I don't have a spanner big enough, so I'm using a socket until number 8 valve, number 4 cylinder exhaust, is fully open. So we have the, you can just make it out, the socket down there, that little shiny thing, and I think this is cylinder 1 because it's nearest the crankshaft pulley. I'm a devil for getting it backwards, but we'll see. So this would be cylinder 4, and then it's just a case of figuring out which one's exhaust and which one's inlet. And I think this one is exhaust because that lines up with our exhaust manifold there, and this one is inlet because that lines up with our inlet exhaust here, I believe. So we have to turn it until this one is fully open, I think. Remember, we're doing this like we've never done it before. Because there's only one of me, recording this and showing you it happening at the same time is proving rather tricky. So, we have got what I assume is number 8 here, fully down, so the spring's fully compressed, which should mean that the valve is fully open. And this one, with the spring fully uncompressed, should mean the valve is fully closed, I think. So now we measure a gap. It says insert a feeler blade of the correct thickness between the rocker arm and the valve stem of number 1 valve. So this is the rule of 9. We're doing, we've set number 8 and then we adjust number 1. And you go on in that way so you know whichever one you've set, it's the other one that makes up 9 that you would then adjust. So like, if you're doing 5, 4 is your companion, if you like. And we just want a firm sliding fit. I have done this many times. So let's find out what our valve clearance should be. Okay, so valve clearance guides, which are down here. The inlet should be between 0.038 and 0.064 millimeters, and the exhaust should be 0.051 to 0.076. Let's find out what we've actually got. On your feeler gauges you have little numbers etched, and I'm aiming for 0.051, which is a little larger than this. So 0.006 is about in the middle. If it's as big as 0.00, if it's as big as 0.08, I know the gap's a little large. If it's as small as this, I know it's a little small. So we'd aim for that. It doesn't even touch the sides. The actual gap is 0.38. That is a nice snug fit as you would want on a gap, but we don't want a gap that large. That's enormous. So I need to slacken off this nut here, wind this screw in with a screwdriver until this gap closes to where we want it, and then tighten that nut back up. I'm going to try and do this with the tripod and we'll see how we get on. 13mm spanner for this one, and just, oh goodness, that's tight. Right, I've gone along and I've slackened off almost all of these nuts. There's one I can't do, but I think when the rocker arm moves I'll be able to get to it. The reason I can't do it is the point on one of these is obscuring the nuts, so I can't get the tools in. I've slackened this nut off, and then I'm going to wind this in, and I'll just wiggle the feeler gauge as I go so that I can feel when it's starting to grab. And you can see just there it just starts to bend, so I need to slacken off a tiny bit. And I mean, you really do this by feel, so it's just as you feel things grabbing, you know you're in the right spot. So that's about right there. I prefer to leave the feeler gauge in as I do the next bit, which is you have to hold the screw in place and do up the nut, and it can be very easy to throw your adjustment off. And you need to tighten it up so it doesn't come undone on you, and then hopefully, yeah, so we can still move that, it's still grabbing just a little bit. This is tight, so we know we're in about the right spot. I'll go through and do the rest, and I shan't do it on camera because it's not the most exciting thing, and I'll report back on what the measurements were when this is all finished. Hopefully the car will be a little bit quieter. So the gap for valve 5 is 0.38. 2 is 0.38 again. Having an unexpected problem with 2. I've got the nut off, which is what I thought was stuck, but the screw section does not want to come out or move. So I'm going to have to do a bit of finagling on that and see if I can get that to start moving. I'm hoping it's not because somebody's cross-threaded it in the past. I'm hoping it's just stuck because it's not been done for such a long time. We shall see. Got it very carefully with the magic of heat because I don't want to melt anything and I don't want to set this on fire. And yeah, it was just stuck and now it moves nicely. That's a relief. Valve 8 is about 0.38. I've got a feeling that somebody has actually set these all to about 0.38 rather than 0.038. That's my gut feeling. So number 4, which is about 0.43, which is much too large. So let's wind that one in. We're on 7, which is the last one, and the gap is once again about 0.38. Well, now we've used all of the fire on everything and got everything adjusted, it's time for cleanup. Because I've got a new gasket to go on. The old gasket is just absolutely shot, unsurprisingly. And yeah, I just need to give the tools a bit of a clean down. Everything's covered in nasty, nasty oil. And then I'll be able to give it a test run and see how this sounds after we're finished. I'm hoping it sounds better. This is the old cork gasket, and these are supposed to be flexible. This isn't. You know? Not great, and it's super compressed, and it's clearly leaking both sides. So that's one of the main things. I've also got to clean this surface. Now, if I wasn't using this car every day, I'd pull the valve train out, I'd give everything a really good scrub and all the rest of it. But this is my daily transport, so I'm going to have to compromise a little bit. I'm not going to disturb any of this. I'm going to leave it alone and then when I do the oil change I'll give it a flush through, fresh oil, and we'll do a soft clean rather than scrubbing this and risk any of this stuff blocking up oilways. I'll just have to keep an eye on things, really. The reality of running stuff like this when it's what you're relying on. Right, let's do clean up and deal with this manky stuff. While I was doing the valves, I had this soaking in some of this barbecue and oven cleaner because that's all I've got in, and yeah, it's done a good job. It's loosened all the gunk, but yeah, this is the worst I've ever had on any car. I've never had anything this bad before. I've seen it, obviously, but actually having it on your own car is very different. It's got cold enough I'm snuffling as well, which isn't great. But yeah. So I'm going to give this a spritz with some sugar soap, which is pretty good stuff, and scrub it with an old dish cleaner, and it should get what's left in here out. I mean, the ideal is definitely a dishwasher, but one, we don't have one, and two, I think Pat would probably kill me. So, you know, there are limits. I didn't expect that to need a pressure washer to get off, but here we are. I scrubbed and scraped what I could, but honestly it was so thick and gloopy I was just moving it around. As it was, the pressure washer struggled with it too. But it's done. I dread to think what's in the sump on this car now. Oh well. I've cleaned up the surface here where the gasket goes. I've got rid of the ridge of old oil that had built up on the inside. We've done the valve clearances, so now it should just be a case of bolting everything together, and I'm trying to do this before it gets dark, which is always fun in the UK in December. One nice fresh cork gasket. These are so cheap that basically you should replace them every time you do an oil change, and then you don't really get the leak problems. After cleaning it, I can see there's these metal guides, and you've got one on each side, and that holds the gasket in place for you, so there should be no need to put kind of any glue or anything on here to hold it in place. I'm not using any extra sealants, because again, that shouldn't be necessary. So we'll try and get this on the engine without everything getting in the way and pushing the gaskets off. Right, that's on. I was in the way of the camera the whole time. Sorry I couldn't film it, but basically you rotate it that way and sort of hold the gasket and turn it very carefully, making sure you don't snag on the various cables until it seats in place. It can take a couple of attempts. I can now bolt this down. I know there's a little bit of moisture in here. That's not going to cause any problems. I've dried it out as best I can. Ideally you'd leave it overnight or something. I can't do that. And once the engine's been through a few cycles, it'll burn that moisture off anyway. You don't want to over tighten these. Just go until they're snug. And then you'll have to revisit in the future anyway, because the cork gasket will compress a bit and change shape with heat cycles. But that's nice and secure. Put you on there. I'm going to leave the airbox off just for the startup. We don't desperately need it, and if this is leaking I can tighten that down a lot easier with the airbox off. It won't make any difference. Hook the cables back up properly. And let these flop backwards. Oh. Huh. Remember to put the bracket on that you've forgotten. Go. Right. Now then, it is completely cold, so it's going to need a bit of choke, and it'll be a bit noisy when I start it up. It might be a little bit reluctant too. Hopefully, when it's settled down, it'll be a good bit quieter. Let's find out. Okay, that's a lot quieter. Goodness me. Been out on an errand in the Maestro, just get it warmed through, get it sorted out, and yeah, it's a different car. Let's just turn that fan off. The only problem I have now is the idle's a little bit low. But other than that, if I just rest my foot on the accelerator at the moment, it's actually really quiet. When I'm driving it, it's not constantly there in the background. It's like a normal car. Now, when I first got the car, I did drop the idle because it was idling too high. So I'm going to have to raise it back up again. But that's okay. I can reset the car to what it should be, and hopefully that will fix that problem. But overall, it sounds a lot quieter and a lot smoother. The performance side of it as well is quite surprising. It pulls a lot more cleanly, and it's a lot less work to drive, which I hadn't really expected. So we'll carry on, just improving things gradually, and I'll give you a proper run out in this when I've finished doing some more adjustments. Bit dark now, I know it doesn't look it on camera, but it really is. And yeah, good stuff. I'm happy, it's progress, and it was worth the effort. I'm glad it was worth the effort. There we go, foot off the accelerator completely, and you can tell it's not entirely happy, it's a bit low. So we'll fix that, and yeah, I'll see you in a bit when I've done that.
Well, I made a bit of a mistake, and as you can probably hear from my voice, I'm not very well. Better than I was. Yeah, I'm going to have to go through and redo all of these clearances again. I would have done it sooner, except I caught COVID, and so did Pat. And then it snowed all over everything, so I've been shut in the house for a little bit. I'm not going to talk much while I do this. My voice is still not great. I'm just going to crack on, reset these to the correct gaps, and then we'll see what it sounds like afterwards. everything set up in there, ready to go. The mistake I had made is a really silly one. What I'd done is I'd looked in the book for valve clearance, and for some reason I'd seen that and thought, oh, that's my valve clearances. Now, fortunately, I posted on the forums and people were like, that seems like a really tiny gap. And I went back and had a look and realised, clearance in guide. So this gap is really, really small because this is the gap between the valve stem and the guide tube, I think. What I should have looked at is over here where it says valve clearances. And these are the figures I actually want. Now my car is just a basic 1.3, so the valve clearance should be 0.38, which is this feeler gauge, which is about where everything was when I started, apart from 1 or 2. I don't know what the difference is with the HLE. I'm assuming a different carburetor or something, but that valve clearance is just a little bit smaller. I'm going to ignore that for now. We'll go 0.38, rule of 9, and go through exactly the same as I did before. I shan't bore you with filming the whole thing. I'll just get it done, and yeah, we'll see what it's like when I'm finished.
Right, we're all set, nice and snug. These are all opened back up to 0.38. One advantage is the now then, I think it was one of these two was quite stuck, but since I last did the test run after readjusting it wrong the first time, that freed up so I could get them all done, which is great. Going to fight getting the valve cover back on through all of this, and we'll start it up and see how it behaves.
Well, it sounds okay. It's a bit grumpy because it's very cold. It's not been running a week or so. I'm going to take it for a spin, and that'll improve matters. Slight problem before taking it for a run. I've got a condensation problem in here, and yeah. So I'm just having to wait for things to clear out a bit before I can actually take this for a run. Gives it a chance to warm up a little bit, so not all bad. You can hear though, it sounds pretty good. Hopefully it'll sound better once we've warmed it through. I'm happy enough with that. It drives okay. It's a lot quieter on the move than it was, which is good. It still needs a bit of tuning. I think the carburetor could do with a rebuild and definitely resetting properly. I think it's a bit worn, but it's fine. Better on the frozen slush than I was expecting. I'm only running those Uniroyals, so they're not really winter tyres, they're just kind of all-weathers. And it's okay. I wouldn't like to go very far on anything kind of more serious, ice and snow wise, but it'll do for what I need to do. No danger. Yeah, I think that'll do for this one. I'm going to get myself inside and get warm. And as much as I'm enjoying having my voice back, finally, I don't want to lose it again. Right, I shall see you all next Tuesday, hopefully. Thanks for watching.